All right, we'll go ahead and call Marshall County Fiscal Court to order, January 17th, 2017. I put on the correspondence, there's some bids that are out there. I want to make sure that the residents in Marshall County are aware that there are some bids at the pad office. Jackson Purchase Local Officials Organization, they've got several vehicles. We're going to upload this to the web page, but there's several vehicles that they're putting out for bids, so they'll take bids. If you will, get on the web page and look at these vehicles. If people are interested in them, then they can take a bid on. There's a 98 Ford half-ton, 3/4 ton, 2006 Dodge Caravan, two of them actually. So there's some vehicles there.
Looks like all low mileage too, 160, 158.
Let's see, they'll take from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. The vehicles will sell as is with no warranty. They'll be accepted in sealed envelopes, marked bid, and designate which vehicle is being bid upon until Monday, January 23rd this year at 1:30 p.m., at which time they will be open and read aloud. So if there's anybody out there that's wanting some vehicles, the pad office has got some bids. They also have some land that they're bidding as well. Looks like this is located in Graves County, but the Marshall County Sanitation Department will be accepting bids on a 2017 30 to 35 horsepower tractor. Specs can be picked up at the county judge's office. Bids have to be turned in by close of January 20th, 2017. Marshall County Sanitation Department has the right to reject any and all bids. So it's got the specs out there for the bids. What we've tried to do is we've tried to notify those companies that like the bid. We at least try to get the information out there to them. We've got I know Dez puts all the information in. We'll send out an email to anybody that has bid or has bid in the past. That way we try to keep them informed. So that information is out there. We'll move on under old business. Approved minutes for January 3rd.
Motion to approve the minutes is written, Judge.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Under new business, the 2017 holiday schedule. We had talked with the clerk's office. December 25th, they're going to be observed. I believe that's on Monday. And then the 26th is going to be observed on Tuesday. I think we had it Friday and Monday. So we just want to make a change to that. That's the only change we're making, so that we will observe Monday and Tuesday, the 25th and 26th.
Let me ask you a question, Judge. I was trying to fill out the schedule for 2017. July 4th is on a Tuesday, one of our regular court meetings. I assume the courthouse will be closed. Were we planning on meeting July 4th?
If we've got it scheduled, I'd say we could change that. We're not going to be open.
I thought we'd wrap that up with, if we're changing the holiday, something in January. I just noticed that, I just assumed that since the courthouse was going to be closed and it was a July 4th holiday, I figured we would reschedule that meeting or cancel that meeting or whatever we decide to do.
I think we can reschedule it.
Can we?
We probably could do it a little closer to time. I never do know, I mean, any of us may have a conflict at some point closer. I didn't know if we could change it now or just wait till closer to time. to
Sure.
change it.
Either cancel or change.
Cancel. Whatever.
We need a motion to change the current holiday schedule, December 25th and 26th, to be observed on Monday and Tuesday this year.
Motion to make that change to the holiday schedule.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Under new business, we have sat down, we've got a letter that we want to present to the Marshall County Hospital. If you look at the contract that we have, it gives a period of time where the fiscal court can review that contract, and the party that reviews it, either party that reviews it, can actually terminate the contract and negotiate new contracts. The existing one, I think, was 1996 is when it was created. And in it, basically, it's 45 days prior to, I think it's July 1, that either party has to submit a letter to the other party. The reason why we bring this up is I've talked to several people in the community as far as the ambulance service. And when we have a service that is being managed, I think especially when we have an agreement that's been dated since '96, we definitely have to look at it and review it. But we need to make it about the ambulance service, the service that we obviously have control of the ambulance department. We have all the capital. But citizens in the community, it's kind of like 911. If you don't call 911 until you need it, you want it to be there. Same thing with the ambulance service. When you need it, you want it to be there. So what we wanted to do was put out a request for proposals to see if we can get some feedback from other companies that actually manage ambulance services, make it more competitive, and make it more specific to the ambulance service that we provide in Marshall County. It's a competitive atmosphere out there. It's an issue across not only the state, not only in this county or in this region, but the ambulance service is competing with area ambulance services. We've got a shortfall in personnel. We've got employees that are looking for benefits. So our competitors are drawing our resources away from us. Obviously, we want the best for our ambulance service. And I think that we need to start being more competitive with our ambulance service so that we can get those employees that Brian desperately needs. And again, it's a nationwide issue between paramedics, the employees that have the required skills. I know I just recently rode on a 3-hour trip to Louisville on the back of one of our ambulances. They took very well, they took care of me, but we can do better. So that's why I think that we need to at least put out a request for proposal to see if there's a company out there that actually manages ambulance services specifically, and let's make this competitive. Currently, I think the contract, we're paying about $202,000 for the ambulance service to be managed. There are shortfalls when a hospital manages an ambulance service. Sometimes that ambulance service is, I won't say that ours is being at the bottom of the list, but the hospital comes first. And I think with the ambulance service and its employees and what we provide to our citizens in this community, we need to look at our ambulance service and make it a priority. So that's why I bring that to the table for discussion.
Has the letter already been mailed to the ambulance service?
I don't think so.
No.
That was my concern. The letter's dated, and I, again, received this at 3:15 on Friday, and the courthouse was closed yesterday, but that was my concern, that the letter was dated January the 10th, and that the letter had been sent without, obviously, I would think that if we're talking about the change in the structure of the ambulance service, that this body would be informed, or and I just assumed that the letter had already gone out. Obviously, was it going to go out and somebody changed their mind, or?
No.
It's gonna take a vote to do that.
I understand.
We can just change the
We have
date
talked
on it.
individually, we understand
guys
that
want
too, or assume that that's what happened, but didn't know, I just didn't understand why the January 10th was on there.
That's when we sent it to, we
That may
sent
have
it to the attorney's office for the draft letter.
Probably the date that I drafted it.
Yeah, nothing has been sent to the hospital yet. We had the attorney's office draft a letter so that we can present it to the commissioners.
I don't disagree necessarily that we, that we can, taking this path necessarily, but I do believe that when we say we're going to terminate this agreement, that we need to take enough time to look at all the implications of terminating that agreement and the possibility that we may have to manage the ambulance service ourselves. The county would have to, that other counties do, but that we may or may not get an acceptable contractor that would want to do that, and that we would have to then, if that contract's terminated, that we might have to be the actual entity that operates the service.
I think prior to this agreement being entered into back in '96, we were
We did, and I know there's some issues there that need to be at least looked at, and I think gone over to be sure we understand what the cost would be to the county if we actually, I think we need to be in a position where we're prepared. If we're gonna negotiate, we need to be able to say, well, we'll just take it over and we'll do it if none of the contract or agreements are acceptable. If we're not in that position, if we don't know exactly what we think it's gonna cost, then I don't know how, I don't wanna get in a situation where we say terminate.
Yeah, it's costing us right now 200, and just on the contract for the management piece, it's 202,000. We own all the capital. And actually,
that.
we sit in a better position as a county government owning the ambulance service than others throughout the state, because you look at some of the other counties or cities, whoever owns their ambulance service, they don't own the building where their ambulance service is at. They don't own their chassis. They don't own their buses. We sit in a very favorable position, more so than others. And those management companies, we're more attracted to them because we do own our capital. We don't have to go to the hospital.
Again, I don't disagree. We will be taking on a significant number of employees, their benefits. A lot of them are already retired. There's dollars, there's real implications on the retirement system. What do we have to pay into it? I think there's a lot of, just a lot of things we ought to look at. If it's just 45 days ahead, it looks like we could look
Sure.
at some of those things for a short period of time here and do a few calculations to see just exactly what that's gonna do with Emily and benefits and all of that would be tagged to us operating
Sure.
it. And then I don't have any problem with us trying to renegotiate.
Sure.
We've talked about doing that in the past, and
And I think 45 days puts us February,
I thought it was 30. Is it 45?
or, yeah, pull it up.
July 1st, that ought to be
Oh,
up
no,
in,
it's-
that should be up
The
in.
agreement says you have to give notice
Give notice.
30 days prior to March 15th, I think. It's either 30 or 45.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
we're still within that window, but that's why we're presenting.
Okay, well, what we need to, if we know that, if the next meeting would be, I can do my due diligence by the next meeting, I think, to get a better handle on, get with Emily and talk about, I guess, employee costs and that sort of thing, just to get an idea of what's gonna happen if we say terminate. When we say terminate, I
Well,
want to make sure we're prepared.
Yeah, the terminology, in order to even go further, you say you've talked about in the past, in order to get there, you got to terminate the original agreement. And there's a time window for that. So it's written into the contract as far as what both parties have to do. So we're just executing. And now the timeline, we've got plenty of time to execute our portion that we have to. But in order to even look at a proposal, we have to terminate the existing one.
When we terminate, we need to be prepared to take it over
Sure.
if we had to.
Sure.
We need to sit
Absolutely.
down, yeah.
'Cause when they say terminate, they may be thrilled that we're terminating. Then they may say, yeah, here you go.
Well, we've talked to David, and I think he's even mentioned that they're losing money.
They say they are, but
So,
anyway,
well,
there's
well,
always
that's,
differences
yes,
of opinion.
yes. yes.
And we've, again, that's.
There's a
been
lot
the
more
discussion.
behind that.
I thought David had already received the letter. That was my understanding
No,
Friday.
that letter has not been sent out.
I went
don't
by
know.
there and talked to him yesterday. He said, I haven't received the letter, but are you telling me when I get the letter, y'all are gonna take it over? I said, I don't have no idea of
Yeah,
intentions.
if you read the current agreement, that's what we are bound by right now. And that's what we read, and that's what we have looked at, in section
March
5 there.
31st.
Yes.
We're looking
Okay.
at mid-February.
So we could do the next, we could
Yeah.
just have the next meeting. I think I could get more comfortable with what,
Yeah.
what we're gonna vote
Sure.
on. I'd make a motion, we table this till the next meeting and then vote on it if that's.
Yeah, this is, I mean, we're here for the discussion.
Okay.
So we don't even have to make a motion. I mean, this is the discussion of it.
Do
Yeah.
we know that we want to end this agreement? If we haven't found a solution, I know we haven't discussed a permanent solution, and as Jason said, well before, when Marshall County Ambulance Service first came into being, they were county employees, and we got, 2 years ago, the last employee was left, and that was our responsibility, and the rest of them are paid by the ambulance service. But, you've got benefits, you've got retirement, and I know at one time, a long time ago, 15, 20 years ago, when all this started, part of the ambulance employees were hazardous duty employees, and half of them were not. And the ones that obviously worked for the hospital were not, but the ones that worked for us, Marshall County, and were paid by Marshall County Fiscal Court, were hazardous duty. So you've got all that to look into, and I was just, didn't understand the January 10th date and concerned because I thought that was, I just kind of like putting the cart before the horse. I know we haven't discussed that, and I contacted both Johnny and Bob to see if I missed something, and
I think we've already identified that the January 10th is when we sent it to the county attorney's office.
well, this
I mean, that is-
is
we
a
can-
letter to Mr. Fuqua.
Well,
And
that's who
that was-
it's
I mean,
going to go
that-
to. It's a draft. I mean, it's
okay. I
not.
mean, I didn't know.
There's no signature on it yet.
I understand the explanation. I had to
Okay.
form my own conclusion, and that was a concern of mine, but that we haven't, had an opportunity to discuss, in which we need to, and I'm glad we're going to do that.
I wish we could sit down with Brian.
Sure.
Have discussion too.
We can, I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. I think, what Bob's saying is he's wanting to look at the numbers as far as if we get stuck with the employees and the benefits and everything. We can have representatives or CEOs from companies come in and give a presentation to you as far as what they offer in other counties, and so that, you can see those companies are specific to ambulance services. And this is what we have to stay focused on, is that
Yeah.
it's about the ambulance service.
I don't disagree with.
But we can do that.
I tell you what we might.
We can have
What
some.
we might do is, approach David and see, I think he'd be open to this. Of course, I can't speak for him, but I do remember, Judge Miller, Cheryl Miller and I and David sitting down back in late 15, I think it was. Emily, I think, was in there too. And, what we might do is, since we do have these issues to hammer out, is just see if we can sign some kind of agreement giving us an extension of time as opposed to holding us fast to that February 14th deadline.
Sure.
Well, and they may want to bid on this.
Well, yeah, they would. I mean, and that's one of the benefits, is you get more people to bid on it. But yeah, if you want to do that, I'd be interested to see if the other party would like to extend that. Yeah. Do we need a motion for that, or to give you the authority to make contact with him? And
We're going to discuss it next meeting, and I plan to talk to him individually.
What he's saying is to extend it so that we're not rushed for time.
I mean, that'd be fine if we want to approach him, see if you want to make an
In
extension,
agreement.
make a motion to have Jason speak to him, to Mr. Fuqua, to see if he would extend the time period here. So
Yeah.
we could have a little more time to review the information.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You can get back to us by next meeting? Okay.
He may
I'll
very
be
well
prepared.
want to keep it since he's got it down.
I'll still be,
To a
I
science.
mean, I'll be
Sure.
prepared to talk about it and do something the next meeting. If we need to. If we don't, that'd be fine.
All right, on the new business, bid advertisement, we threw this in here. We forgot to add this to the agenda, but basically, we're asking for permission to move forward. We're at that point where we can do the bid advertisement for the uniforms, and that's for all the departments. We just need approval to get that going.
Make a motion to advertise for county uniform bid.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on the new business is the Possum Trot Sharp Fire Protection District Audit Report for June 30th of 2016.
Motion to accept the audit, Judge.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On the new business, next is the Treasurer's Report.
December 31st, 2016, general fund had a book balance of $2,099,989.52. Road fund, $1,197,035.56. Jail fund, $165,068.73. Grant fund, $1,161.38. 911 fund, $91,978.99. Occupational tax administrator, $2,157,960.79. Veterans Band Fund, $4,351.08. ABC, $108,980.27. Building inspection, $26,319.30 for total reporting funds of $5,852,845.62.
Motion to accept the treasurer's report, subject to audit.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Treasurer's Quarterly Report.
Treasurer's quarterly report reflects the same numbers. You'll notice at the second page of your cover, you have that same reporting number of $5,852,845.62.
Motion to accept that treasurer's report.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Appropriations transfer.
I'm requesting your permission to shift from the fiscal court leasing amount. We had a budget of 11,000 there for two vehicles from, originally we were leasing, we had talked about from Enterprise, but we actually wound up getting those locally. So to shift one of those amounts to the park for that truck, their truck that they got. And then the sheriff's auto expense, he's going to ask to transfer 5,000 from his out-of-county travel into auto expense, since we asked him to stop using ABC funds for a little while until we see how ABC funds roll in.
Motion to approve the appropriation transfers.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is the intra-fund transfer, the encumbrance report.
General fund had an encumbrance balance of $8,766.51 for the quarter ending December 31st, 2016. Road funds was $58,329. Jail fund, $19,966.63. 911 fund, $14,568.36. And ABC fund, $126.71 for a total encumbered funds of $101,757.21.
Motion to accept the encumbrance report.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is the appropriations transfer, the intra-fund transfer.
Yeah, this is, you can leave that one up there, though. We have remaining in budgeted subsidy to forward to 911, $46,714.55. That's budgeted. And then I also did receive some FEMA monies from the flood. And those funds went into the general, the FEMA put them in the general fund. They actually should go to the road fund. So I'm asking your approval to move those from the general fund to the road fund for $51,206.63 for those. So its totals transfers $97,921.18.
Motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Approve payment of the bills.
Motion to pay the bills, Judge.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the new business, I put on here an update on the Sheriff's Department. As far as last court meeting, we were talking about the overtime, the sheriff's overtime. I want to make sure that everybody understands the course that we've taken. I know my staff and I have worked hard at trying to keep the Sheriff's Department within their deputy hire maximum. This year, in October, we wrote a letter to him and advised him if he continues to spend the way he is, that he would be over. He worked with Emily, and they actually came in under their deputy hire maximum, especially their OT. That was the issue that was at hand. Now, that's moving forward, but we have to work together. Unfortunately, it is very difficult because every time we move forward, we find more issues. It was clear to me when I came into office that the one agency that was managed questionably because of the audit reports was the Sheriff's Department. And if you go back and you look at the details, you can't deny the facts. The goal for us is to try to make the management piece, not the agency as far as the officers. The officers are doing a great job. It's the management piece. It's clear that there's issues with documents that are submitted to us, comments that are made. I go back and we look and we review the information that's given to us to try to find out why we're not adding up the numbers. And it's concerning to me, and my goal is to help. Obviously, there's opinions on that, but my goal is to help because we're only going to succeed as a county agency when we work together. Last week, or last court meeting, I talked about how we have worked hard this year, and we managed to stay under, to help keep you under that deputy hire maximum, I think the first time in many years. That's an achievement, and we should be proud of that. But that is a lot of time and a lot of effort out of my staff, and we're prepared to do that. But we should see room for improvement. You know I sat down with the sheriff in January of last year, and I made it very clear, based off of the history that I saw through the audit reports, if that department is over in the budget or the deputy hire maximum, I'm not going to amend it. And the reason why is because the taxpayers need to be in the front seat. And that's who I'm here for, the taxpayers. It's taxpayers' money. We have to manage those monies. And it's been literally like pulling teeth. And I think that letter that we sent out in October got somebody's attention because we're actually doing better. And that's the goal. The goal here is to do better. Because at the end of the day, it's not my money. It's not your money. It's the taxpayers' money. The problem is that it shouldn't have to be that way, and it's taken a lot of time out of my office. Last court meeting, we were talking about the deputy overtime. And we kind of got off on a domestic violence increase. We got off on we're a wet county for the first time. I'm here to tell you we've been a wet county for a long time. It's just the first time we have an ordinance saying we can sell alcohol in this county. There's information that was presented in that court that I still haven't got. We're trying to get all that information. The documents that were submitted, you can go through the documents that we were all submitted from the sheriff. You can go through and you can look and see there's discrepancies, specifically in overtime. We've got issues of employees that were paid too much. We've got issues of employees that weren't paid enough. Just in the documents that were submitted, we didn't talk about that. We jumped right in. Now, I will be fair and say that you have a timeline that you have to get submitted to DLG. We all understand that. But the other thing that this court has is the responsibility to stay on top of the documents that are submitted and the information that is discussed in open court. And I think that there was some issues that I have, information that I was told that actually isn't accurate. And we made a motion to give you $50,000. Basically throw money at a problem. And I do not throw money at a problem unless the details are there, the justification is there. I know in our conversation, every department head has to come in front of this court and articulate their needs. I think if you look at the details, the overtime, again, we're talking about overtime. This year, the numbers that you came up with, the sheriff's department came up with, was, I believe, 2267.75. If you look at the documents that he submitted, you'll see that payroll was different. We had employees that were either paid too much or employees that weren't paid enough. That, to me, needs further investigation, because if we got employees that we're not paying and they're actually working overtime, that's a problem. We didn't even get that far to discuss those issues. Now, I wrote a letter to both the sheriff's department and the county attorney's office to try to get those numbers. I know you were out of town, I think Major Maddox had got that information for us, but the documents that were submitted in court last meeting, there's a lot of inaccuracies. And again, we're talking about the actual overtime. We increased it by $50,000. There's information that this court didn't hear about that the media heard about in call volumes. The one thing that we need to understand about the call volumes is that it's changed, the way that the call volume is done. And that's a good thing, because 911 is actually being more proactive in accountability. In the years past, some of those CAD calls weren't entered into the CAD. They're actually entering all those CAD calls. So they've changed their philosophies at 911. So what we may actually see this year is a true number of years past. But we have to look at the details. And I feel like these are some serious issues. We talked about the federal overtime. Federal overtime is specifically looking for DUIs on top of, you guys combine it together. You're looking for traffic violations, seat belts, but the DUIs specifically. And I asked if those funds were exhausted, and you said they were. Do you know how much money was left on the table out of those funds for 2015? Either one of you?
It was a minimal amount, I mean.
15 or 16?
Right, and yes, to clarify, the federal overtime obviously works on the federal holiday, October 1, or calendar, October 1 to September 31.
I don't have that with me, Judge.
It was about $4,000. 2015, your agency received about $20,000. 2016, which you just received, you typically receive it around August, September, was $17,750. Do you know when the actual federal overtime was started, when it was working?
Just started within the past.
For that year,
Yeah,
for 2016?
there's some lag time because when the money actually becomes available, there's
Right.
a couple months of lag.
Right. It was actually, you receive it, if you look at the federal calendar, October 1 is when it starts. You tend to receive it a little bit before because we're obviously on a July 1 to end of June. And then you're a fee office, you start January 1, so you can see where the calendar is different. However, 2016, it started in February. So when you look at, and the reason why I bring that up is because when you look at those numbers, it's for the entire 2016 year, because the end of that federal calendar year is September. My point is, we were discussing overtime. We weren't discussing how good of a job your men do. That's not even in question. But when we talk about the management piece with the overtime, you just increased your overtime. And this court, based off of the information that was submitted to us, increased at $50,000. We've done an average already. I know I recommended about $3,000 to come in at a mean average so that we can give you a buffer. But the justification for that big of an increase, when I look back at these numbers, we're not paying people correctly. There's a discrepancy that we have to identify quickly because we're only talking about 1 year. You go back to the years, all the way back to 2013, we can show you discrepancies in every year, and it's in the overtime. If we look at just the overtime, we can show you discrepancies. The letter that I just sent to your office, along with the county attorney's office, your documents that you just submitted to us is totally different than the documents that were submitted last court. So we have an area where there's some very big inconsistencies, and when we're talking about overtime and we're just throwing money at a problem, I think that's a problem. We have to get to the root of the problem. We don't have time. And these conversations are tough. I don't like having this conversation, but I have to because that's my job. We have to have these conversations. It's been a year. I've been in office for just a little bit over a year, and I can tell you there's a problem administratively in your office. I've tried to help, and I just keep getting pushback. We're taking baby steps. We need to get on board. These issues, you submitted documents that had discrepancies in them. Big discrepancies where your employees are either overpaid or underpaid. And to me, that's an issue. It's an issue that we need to start paying attention to because we just threw $50,000 at your agency and we didn't fix the problem. Here's my recommendation. Because the other issue is FMLA. This is a federal law, gentlemen. It's not Kevin Neal's law. It's not the commissioner's law. It is a federal law. As an employer, we have responsibilities to get those employees their rights, notify them of their rights. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we notify them because we're held bound to that law within 5 days. Now, we discussed this in previous courts. I actually handed you or passed around all the FMLA documents. We have an employee that's off. You have an employee that's injured, that's been off. the response we got back from your office was that that employee rates no FMLA. Now, to be fair, if it was a true part-time employee, that would be correct. But you have to look at the FMLA requirements. If they work 1,250 hours, then they rate FMLA. We're not doing the details. We can't do the details in your administration down there. That's your responsibility to make sure that those hours are accumulated and kept up with. I've instructed my staff to basically follow up on the work that's being done so that employees like this don't get slipped through the crack. It's to protect the employee. It's their rights. I mean, there's no way around it. And this employee worked over 1,500 hours. So that employee, we notified Wednesday, Thursday of last week. We went ahead and notified him because we need to get better at that. I highly recommend you go back and look at the FMLA. You have the documents. Obviously, there's some discrepancies in the time. If you look at the numbers that you just submitted to my office, you can go through. It doesn't take but 20 minutes to go through and look at the numbers that they don't add up. Court time. I asked about court time. The numbers that you just submitted, we identified 2, 4, 6, 8 employees that had discrepancies compared to the numbers that you submitted. There were discrepancies. And then to the payroll. We go off of payroll, what we're paying the employees, the information that comes to this office. That's why we wanted to break it down individually, because if you get a bulk number, Treasurer's office doesn't know how to break that down. But there is a history. You can go back and Emily's documents and the documents that were submitted to us last court meeting, every one of them at the very bottom of the page had the total. And if you look at her totals compared to your totals, there was a discrepancy. Well, we looked. We tried to identify where those discrepancies were, and it was underpaid and overpaid employees. Regarding overtime, again, we're talking overtime. And we threw $50,000 to your office. We kind of got off on we're a wet county, and we got an increase in domestic violence, and we lost track of what we were supposed to be looking at. I spend a lot of time trying to help. I'm here to help, but I can't tolerate this. This is my job. I'm held accountable. If people come to me and say, why are you throwing $50,000 to an office that year after year after year has discrepancies, I have to account for that.
Judge, you keep saying throw $50,000 at them. I received that the fact that was going to be on the agenda, that the county treasurer met 3 different times with the sheriff, the last being January the 29th or December 29th. And I received that and found it on an email and reviewed it on January the 1st for our January 3rd meeting. This court, these other commissioners, I assume that they had the same information or zero information until didn't even know it was going to be on the agenda till that day. And when it was put on the agenda, we made a decision based on the information that we had without any discussion. You know, I know we discussed it a little bit there, but we didn't have that information. That other page that you gave us we got it 2 minutes before the meeting.
If you look at the documents, and these are the documents that you got, this is all the discrepancies. They're all on there. Emily wrote at the bottom the difference. I mean, it didn't take 10 minutes to go down and identify where there's discrepancies. My thing is that I recommended, we ease into the overtime if we're going to increase it at all. We ease into it. We went full-blown 4,000. I mean, the document that she brought the morning of the court, it just made this, it was the same information, but it was broken down in 2,000, or 2,500, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000 to show you what the payout is. I mean, you got the same information that we got. Actually, in court that day, I was asking questions I couldn't get the answers to.
I understand
Now, we
that,
all-
so I didn't have any information either, but we just didn't have time, or I can't speak for the other two commissioners, but based on the information, and I'm the one that said, you know, Marshall County is wet for the first time, and these alcohol monies go towards law enforcement, increased law enforcement because of being wet, and that's what these tax dollars go to.
The county
Do-
attorney
do you-
added that not just domestic violence, but that alcohol-related court cases were up 40%.
Do
That's
you?
quite a change.
And he retracted that. Do you know how much overtime was spent on DUI cases this year? The numbers that he submitted in those documents, they're inaccurate.
Well, I didn't know that, but
But
this
do you know-
court didn't discuss that before the meeting, and I've had this conversation with you, and it's my contention that we need to discuss these things before we come up here, whether it's one-on-one or the facts, and have the facts instead of, you know, something put on the agenda right before the meeting, and be able to discuss that. We need to have information so we can discuss that, digest that, and make an informed decision on
And
it.
that's-
And that didn't happen in that case.
And that's a great point. The questions that I was asking, I don't think anybody else asked questions, but the question I was asking, I didn't get an answer. And that happened right here in open court. We didn't get the information. We could identify there were some discrepancies. My point is that this governing body, through 4,000 hours, without looking at the details, the county attorneys, I think you made your motion off the county attorney's comments. Do you know how much overtime in that 40% increase? Just because there's a call increase, there was numbers that was submitted to the media. Just because there's a call increase doesn't mean that it's all related to overtime. We were talking about overtime. I've been in those positions where the call volume may increase, and guess what? During an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift, I'm working.
Now, whether he uses it or not, I felt like he deserved the tools to do as good a job as he could. And again, for what I understood, there was an increase in alcohol-related, which I could understand. I can understand that part. And an increase in alcohol-related issues. They had to involve the sheriff's department to some extent.
There was no questions. I don't think, Bob, you asked one question last meeting. I think that no one heard that this is the first time we kept him under his deputy hire overtime, his overtime. We kept him under it. Typically, when you have a justification to increase to 4,000, we would have heard it last court meeting. An increase in 50%, 53% of calls, that's not justification in my opinion. That was it. I mean, we increased the overtime when we actually got him under and managed it the way it should be managed, even with all these discrepancies, for the first time.
I will correct you on that. 2015, we were under as well.
Well, that's a good thing, but you can go back and look that there's been many years where you were over.
Yes, and just like what you were saying with the $500,000 overage that was on the last audit, it was a procedural issue.
Well, when you look at your overtime, answer me how you have an employee, we'll just single out one employee, has 130 hours that we pay out. On your overtime for that individual, it's 118. I send the letter to your office, I get a different letter that has them at 132. And that's specifically overtime. And I can go down and show you more employees are that way. You may have employees down there for years that haven't been paid correctly, or more importantly, been overpaying, and we know that there are discrepancies with the dollars.
I have no problem with working with it. It's not intentional in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
Nobody, let me be clear, nobody is saying that it's intentional. Our job is to look
That's
at.
kind of what it feels like.
Well, it feels like that because you have a history of being over. My responsibility is to find out why.
Okay, and
We're-
and I don't mind working with the treasurer to find out what the issues
It's-
are here, and that was never discussed when we sat down and was talking about the deputy hire. I mean, none of that was ever discussed.
It was discussed. It was specifically discussed as if you have an increase in anything, you have to articulate it, no different than any other department head. If you want to call communicating with the treasurer, working with this governing body, that's not enough. I mean,
What is your suggestion?
my suggestion to start off with is not to submit. I mean, this documents that, who prepared these documents?
Well, I don't know which one, what do you have?
This is what you submitted.
I believe is the document that went out with our,
It was the
Proposal
emailed out to all
last-
the commissioners. Who actually created this document? It came from your agency.
Yeah, it came from us. It was all of our numbers, and like I said, we got with Emily and compared. And
I think that's your historical data for overtime hours because you had given us, yes, that's what that is, because it's got your supervisors totaled at the top, because they
Yeah, this is what you submitted to us.
right, and it was going off of our documentation that we keep.
Are you aware that the documents that you resubmitted last week that I asked
I was not here, and I have not reviewed those.
are inconsistent as well?
I was not here to review those. I haven't seen those yet, because I have not been here.
Well, I understand that, and that's why I asked, who created this document? David, did you create this? Who created this?
The first document, Judge?
Yes.
No,
Who created it?
I don't know.
It was off of our spreadsheet that Jennifer keeps.
Okay. Did Jennifer create this?
Yeah.
Okay. David, who created this?
Jennifer created the second document that I sent you.
We got two documents created by the same person, and they're inconsistent. That's my point.
Okay.
We,
We're looking to see why.
we're a year into this, and we still have the same issues. That's not communicating. Communicating to her is not communicating to me or communicating to the elected officials.
Okay.
I mean, when I sat down with you, I made it very clear. People know me by now. Tough decisions, we sit down, we talk about them, because we have to. And I made it very clear. When you got your letter in October, I think there was a little bit of initiative because I said, if you're over, it's coming out of your pocket. There's some initiative to get you under. I didn't throw $50,000 at him. I gave him a little bit of initiative, and that was it's going to come out of your pocket. And that's by statute, not Kevin Neal's opinion. That's the other option, is by statute. It comes out of your pocket. And there was a huge push, once you got that letter, to be under. Is that correct?
We did our best.
That would
to
be
stay on.
correct, because you got under. So now you have some initiative. If it's your money coming out of your pocket, you got a little bit of initiative. The taxpayers, year after year after year, audit after audit that I looked at, gentlemen, I'm not putting up with that. The taxpayer is going to be in the front seat. I've spent a lot of time in this to try to find out why this one agency, it's not picking on you, like you would like to portray it as, it's identifying that there is an administrative problem, and we need to fix it. And this court has the authority to amend what we just passed last meeting. I highly suggest it, but that's just me speaking. At a minimum, I'm here to help. I think we need to look at requesting a free on-site consultative survey through the Labor Cabinet, where they come down. FMLA, you got to get better at that. If we've already identified that employees, you are responsible for your employees, and I think that we need to get that under control. Inconsistent documents, that's a problem. That needs to be under control. Been doing this for a year. Now, later, if you want to talk about we're a wet county for the first time and how it's affected our county, that's another subject matter. How it's affected domestic violence in our community, that's another subject matter. But you go back and you pull the numbers, federal overtime. Last year, based off your numbers, the federal overtime, all your DUI arrests were under your federal overtime, 58. What that means is that federal overtime is 100% reimbursed. So all the DUIs were done last year under your federal overtime program. Based off your numbers. You've got 58
Did we have that information
arrests.
when we made that decision last court meeting?
That's what I requested right here.
Oh,
And we didn't get that
but
information.
My point is that we did not have that information. It was put on the agenda to act on something that we had no information to act on. We had no facts to digest and make an informed decision,
Well,
which we need
Rick,
to have. And we've had this conversation.
Yes, and I would,
And I wish I had that before that. My only thought was that we've got alcohol in Marshall County. There's positives and negatives with alcohol, and this man right here has to fool with the negatives of alcohol. And that's the only information I had to make that decision.
then my
No
question would
discussion.
be.
We didn't meet with.
My question
We didn't
would
meet with the
be-
treasurer. We didn't meet when the treasurer and the sheriff met to get these hours and so forth. We didn't have that information.
You had the same information that I had at that meeting. If that was the case, you second the motion to give him exactly 4,000 minutes,
I
or
did,
4,000 hours.
based on, and I explained my reasoning for the information that I had, which is not adequate information, nor did we have time to discuss it adequately. We should have got all those facts. I would have voted differently if I'd have had the facts and so forth. I don't speak the language. You speak the language. You've been a police officer. I need time to do my homework, which I have done since.
The breakdown here that Emily gave you was a more detailed breakdown of what was submitted by the sheriff. If that was the case, that you had limited information, then
Got
why-
it 2 minutes before this meeting started.
then my concern was that we made a motion to give him the full amount that he requested. Unlimited information, if that's the case, or information that the county attorney had stated on one subject. And that goes to what I was saying. The things that were discussed in court, I think were overlooked. The fact that we've got him under his deputy hire maximum without throwing any money at his agency. Now, I do agree with you, Sheriff, that we need to find that mean average. We do. We need to find and get as close as we can. I do not agree with throwing a lot of money at you and then you work down, because there's a lot of other departments that we need to take care of as well. We did the average for your agency for this year. Do you know what the average is? Just by looking at the information that we have today. You're going to come in based off of the current month. No unforeseen circumstances. About a little over 2,400 hours. Now,
That's good.
that is good. Now, the recommendation of 3,000 that I gave would have gave you a mean average. To me, that's good governing with taxpayers' money.
That's true, but in the way that I look at that, he's managing that, it looks like he's gonna come in underneath it. I mean, that sounds good to me. I don't want him in a position to where he's not using his officers the way he needs to because he's having to meet a number. He's concerned about going over because, and he delays or doesn't use his officers in a way, he eliminates some overtime or some drive-bys or whatever you want to call it. He eliminates some of that unnecessarily because he doesn't have the authority to use those dollars or he's got to come back. I felt like he could take it responsibly, and if there's discrepancies, he says he's gonna work on that, and I think that's exactly what needs to be done. But he needs those tools, I feel like, so that he doesn't have to be concerned.
Well-
If he needs to use those hours, he doesn't need to be concerned about it, as far as,
Let-
the way I look at it.
Let me ask you this, Bob. What concerns did he bring to us last court meeting?
What do you mean by
Did
that?
he come to us and say, I had to hold off overtime here, I couldn't do, he left $4,000 on the budget year for DUI specifically. I mean, what concerns, that's the meeting that we had. You have to articulate. And I agree with you, if he would have come to us and said, here's where I was short, here, I had to pull this man off, we didn't hear that. And I tell you, when we notified him in October, if we wouldn't have notified him in October, he'd have been over. I firmly believe that. And my philosophy is, and I told my staff the same thing, we're not going to let you fail. If we let you fail, I take that as we failed our part. But we can't be diving into the details of your operation for the next however many years. I mean, you have to stop and take a look. I would be extremely upset at myself if I'm submitting documents that are inaccurate time after time. I mean, that's a start. I don't know how else to, I'm offering that we send the Labor Cabinet down to do a free site survey to actually help with those questions and how you're managing the Sheriff's Department. That's what I would do first before I throw money at the operation. And that's what I'm bringing to the table. I want you to succeed, but it is taxing on my office when every time we take one step forward, we ask for information, we get more areas of concern. With the information that you have, I mean, I even thought we could have a, special call meeting where we sit down with you specifically and go over the details. We had a budget workshop that really, only two major things I think came out of that. Not one, did we increase the minimum. We had that conversation. Minimum of 2, that's your minimum for this county. I'm all for increasing that minimum. But before we can increase that minimum, we got to clean this up. Because $50,000 that we just gave to you, maybe it's money that you can go to hire somebody else to come out and increase your minimum to 3. That would be a huge asset for you as an agency to increase your minimum. That's what I understand. But it's hard for me to increase your minimum when we have discrepancies in the administration part. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
We've got to clean this up before we can. We've talked about the K-9. We need a K-9. We've got an increase. When you look at the DUI cases that we have, drug cases, the DUIs, that's why I wanted to break it down, alcohol and drug. Your drug DUIs, people just think alcohol. Impaired driving is impaired driving. Doesn't matter if it's alcohol, drugs, sniffing gas. If you're impaired, and it puts citizens at risk. We've talked about a K-9. K-9 is a huge expense, but the payoff is great. And the more drug arrests that he makes, the more drug money he seizes goes back into his coffers, which helps his agency. That's what we need to be striving for. We got to get past this. We got to get past it, throwing money at that agency. We got to look at the details of why we are where we at. I mean, that's as simple as it is. That's the goal. That's the goal that I would like to see for your agency. Because your men are going to go out there and do the job regardless, because that's what they're there for. And nobody questions that they're doing a good job. Now, what I would like to recommend, and I can give this to you, basically they will come in, the Labor Cabinet will come in and sit down for free. It's training. Any questions you have, you can sit down with them, better your organization, your administration, management skills, or whatever the case may be. We don't have time to do that. I'm offering the fact that we can bring them in to where they can help you.
They offer that service for all departments? Or just sheriff's department?
I would think it's all departments when it involves labor.
Free service? Okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, I know we've got 911 that's going to be next that we're going to have to deal with. But yes, they would. It's not just, we've got some departments that need help. And we're trying, but we've got to have the conversation. This is to me serious. We got to fix this. We do have the authority to amend what we had just submitted to DLG.
Y'all's prerogative.
I think the right thing to do, regardless of this is the information we got. We broke it down to where you could do 25, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000.
That was on what Emily presented the last time.
Yeah, it was broken down to where you could see that. But I think, again, I'm going to look at the taxpayers' money. That's the way I'm going to look at it. It may cause a disagreement between me and you, but I'm fine with that because the taxpayer is going to be, I'm going to look at the dollars. And it's not my money, it's their money.
If we disagree, we disagree.
Sure.
And whatever the court decides to do, I have to live with.
You want to make a motion, or I'd entertain a motion to have us reach out? I mean, this, I don't even know if we need a motion since it's free to have the labor cabinet come in and do this.
Probably be safer to have a motion.
Would it be beneficial to, like he was talking about, have them come down and look at the county as a whole instead of just,
It would be
One or two.
beneficial, but for right now, when we talk about individual departments, this is,
I understand, but what I was trying to say is get more bang for your buck there if they're coming down instead of having them come down multiple times.
I don't know if there's, other than 911, I don't know if,
You just said there was all other departments that needed help.
yeah, they need help, but they don't need help like this. This is, you see what I'm saying?
Okay, Judge.
I mean, there's departments that need help, but there's departments that are doing great. I think we need to focus on your department.
Okay, that's up to you.
Can he make that request?
Who?
Kevin?
Is that okay with you, Kevin? Whatever the court wants me to do, I'll do it.
Anybody can make the request. I think that we're discussing that right now.
You think that would be beneficial to you?
Well, is it beneficial to him or the taxpayer? I think it's going to be
I'm talking
beneficial to the
about both.
taxpayer.
Have him get.
I can answer that other question
Yeah.
myself.
Straighten
I
that.
just want to hear both sides of the story.
I think it's clear that it would be beneficial, in my opinion. We have the specifics. Obviously, the FMLA is one. We can identify the problems that we see, and we can make the request. We'll just go ahead and make the request as far as from the, at our level, as far as what we see. You may not see the stuff that we see. And there's, obviously, I didn't get into the details. I don't want to talk about the employees specifically, but we'll just go ahead and make that decision to request it. But we'll need a motion for us to do that, my office to do that.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll get with you, Major Maddox. We'll make this request. We'll show you the details. And again, this is moving the agency forward. Any other questions regarding the information? The other thing I put out there is that we did make a motion to put $50,000 I think we did the average. You're at about 2,500 for the year, 3,000. I think, again, I'll leave that up to the court. That would be my recommendation based off of the information that I've seen. Does the court entertain to change that, amend that?
I'd just like to have all the information that we discussed today. I'd just like to have copies of that, time to look at that. I'm hearing that information for the first time.
What information?
The information that the overtime and what was reimbursed from overtime, and we didn't have all that information at that meeting.
Yeah, you did. It was on the,
Well,
it was on the email.
we got it 2 minutes before the,
No, that
I
was,
got it
That was the one
January the
document.
1st.
It was
the
emailed.
same document, I just added a little bit to it.
Right, I got that, first saw that email on January the 1st, and it was, the last meeting with the sheriff was December the
I think I
29th.
did it on the 30th.
The documents that were submitted, basically, we made it more clear to understand. But the information that he submitted to this court through the email had all the information on there. I mean, you can clearly see that, I mean, she even wrote at the bottom that there was a discrepancy in her payroll numbers compared to his numbers that he had submitted. I don't see where, I mean, that's what got our attention. We're still getting information. I wanted information as far as trying to identify the effects of DUI, alcohol sales in this county, how it's affecting this county.
I want that information too, so I can make an informed decision.
Sent that email December 30th.
December 30th is when you got that information.
That's just exactly what I said. I said that in that email, Emily mentioned that her last meeting with the sheriff was December the 29th, and she emailed it the 30th, and I got it, and obviously there's a holiday involved there, and I got the chance to see that information in that form with no discussion. This building was closed. It was Christmas, New Year's, and then we have a meeting, and my vote was based on the information that I looked at and opened for the first time January 1st, and had no time to discuss with anybody and ask questions, and that's not the way to make an informed decision. But that's the way it was. It was put on the agenda to do so, so I had to make a decision.
I'm gonna disagree with you. The information that everybody got, we all got it. The motion to give him 4,000 hours, I could understand if, I wouldn't have done that, based off just the information that we had. It being put on the agenda, I want to make sure that we're clear that it wasn't in a timely manner. I mean, we do this every fiscal court meeting. We send out the information, and we try our best to get the information out to the commissioners prior to the weekend. And on this, I mean, this information that was submitted to all of you, including myself, it didn't take me long to look at it and see that, okay, we've got a discrepancy. She puts it on there
That's actually the sheriff's,
from his numbers.
that's his writing there.
Yeah. I mean, but you and I had talked, and your numbers were all
His,
about 7.
he and I had, our numbers, the way we got to the calculation was a little bit different. And it was it's because it was an estimate. His numbers from there, from my numbers, may be different because he was looking at a fiscal year and I was looking at a calendar year. So that may be a little bit a part of it. I'm not certain.
The difference is in 2016, you had 3 employees that were overpaid or underpaid. I mean, that, you can look at the numbers and see that it's different. But as far as, we're a wet county and alcohol sales has increased, overtime in our county. And that reminds me, David, on your paperwork that you submitted, there's a new column that is added to it, DUI overtime. You got 2 employees identified as DUI overtime. Is there another DUI? I'm just trying to identify what that is.
Well, Judge, I'm guessing a little bit on this, but I believe what it was, she had to go through because we don't, the way that she requested it, we don't track a lot of these things. So what we did was, is she went through and pulled each officer's timesheets for the time period in question. So I'm assuming where that came from is that they put DUI on the timesheet. In other words, they made a DUI arrest and we're okay with it.
Right.
And that was the cause for that.
Now, I understand that. That's what I'm asking. If, say, your regular shift, you get a DUI, and because you got to do the intoxilizer and all that, that's after your regular hours, that's overtime. Yes, I understand that. That's what I wanted to make sure. Now, in the documents that are submitted where you just have the full overtime, like in the original documents that were submitted to us, it just had FOT. We all know that that's 100% reimbursed, but there wasn't a overtime.
I'm assuming that that is separate from the FOT.
Okay. And if we can just clean that up to where, it matches up, because there's some inaccuracies. You've got two employees that fall under that category. And I totally understand how that happens. I mean, and I think that's easy to explain to the commissioners, how that happens.
To do what we were doing this time, with all that, I only have 2 office staff personnel. And it's gonna take another person to actually track and keep up with all that, because of all the other things we have to keep up with, such as, the taxes and all that. That takes an inordinate amount of time. And yes, it's only from October to April, but it's very labor intensive. I don't want us to be playing catch-up, if you know what I mean.
Well, let me ask you this. When your employees, like in that scenario, if they're working a regular shift, they make a DUI stop at the end of their shift, and it carries them over for 2 hours, it goes on their time card, correct?
They are supposed to denote it on their time sheet on what the overtime is for and who approved it.
I mean, at that point, when you're getting that timesheet, couldn't that be the time, if it's a supervisor, it's just identifying when you work over on your regular shift, that you create a directive to your, whoever, is it the supervisor that's approving it?
Yes.
And then I guess they submit it to who?
Jennifer.
Okay, so they submit it to Jennifer. So once you receive that information, you can isolate that amount of time into its own category. You're already doing the work.
Yes, that can be done in the future.
Yeah, adding another person to do that, I don't.
And look at it, the way we did was because we hadn't previously tracked it that way. So basically, she had to go back, create the new categories, and look at each individual timesheet over the time period. But in the future, that wouldn't be that hard to track it that way.
I'm curious, how did y'all used to track it?
I'm sorry?
How did you used to track the overtime?
It was basically, the categories that you've seen in the past. There was, I would have to go back and look, to be honest, Judge, but I know there were several items that we had as other that you asked us to track individually, and that was what took so long, going back and looking at each individual timesheet in order to do that.
Okay. We'll just get together and iron all that out, so that you can, I think you can do that without adding another person if you're already receiving that information. But we'll get together on that. I don't think as far as amending the budget, I there a,
I'm not prepared to make that big a change until we see more information.
what information do you
Well,
want to
we
see?
did, when we made that, there was a couple of things, and I don't know, they haven't been discussed, and I don't want to get point fingers, I guess, whatever, but Emily had looked at all this, and it didn't appear that it didn't look like there was really significant differences in her numbers and his numbers. There was some, but then she said that it could have been because it was on the annual scale. I mean, he was on a January to December and she was not. So that was part of it. And I thought Kevin said something about that he had, in order to stay under, he had officers working alone. I thought at times he didn't like to do that, or just one officer at night or something. I don't know. I thought that's what was told. You said there wasn't any exchange that justified more overtime, but I thought that was said during some of the discourse that we had.
Why?
And I don't know if it's enough, but right now he's on a path. He's not overusing, obviously, because he's on a path to be about what he was. I mean, I wouldn't be prepared to change. We can make that amendment at any time if it looks like that it's going to be. He's misusing those officer hours for whatever reason. But this time, I feel like he needs that. I don't want to put that, hang that over his head in case he does need something significant happens and he really needs to use those overtime hours.
Well, I've got two things on that. One, I'm going to say that it's his responsibility, not ours. It's his responsibility to stay on top of his overtime. October, we notify him that he was going to go over. Then there's the incentive. If he comes to us, right, instead of us notifying him in October, he should have notified us in October saying, hey, gentlemen, I've got an increase in, calls. I've got one deputy out on the street. My minimum is 2. None of that happened. I would totally understand your position on that. But I'll even go back to our budget meeting where you and I disagreed on the resources. We specifically talked about his resources out on the street, and you and I disagreed on that. And today, you're agreeing, basically with the same argument. And that may be because you don't know the details, and I understand that. I take that in consideration. You may not know the details, but you were pretty adamant that the resources that we were talking about, being out on the street, it is important. If you were to increase your minimum, and we had this conversation at the budget workshop, you could see this. If you could increase your minimum to 3, would you do it?
Sure.
That's right. The answer is yes, and it's your resources. But when we had that conversation in that budget workshop, that wasn't a concern. And that's my point. The priority should be your operations out on the street, answering those calls, your minimum. That should be, in my opinion, your priority, because that's where the majority of the work is done. To justify that, we had that conversation in the budget workshop. You disagreed with me, and you sat there and didn't agree with me. Now, we're right back at square one where you're trying to use the resource as a reason to increase your overtime. And we have to look at it in its factual element. You have a minimum of 2. 2 deputies to run this county, we'll all agree, is not enough, correct? It's not enough. I mean, you need resources out there on the street. The citizens need those resources. I'm all for it. I want to give you more resources in your operations, putting deputies out on the street.
And that's something I've done in the past when I've seen that our overtime is escalated. I've always looked and seen, he can tell you this. We can cut that overtime out by adding a person because it's cheaper to add a person and
Sure
not
it
have
is.
the overtime.
Sure it is.
I've always strived to try to do that.
Well, and I think by increasing your overtime, you took that leverage out of your argument. If you would have come in and said, hey, based off of what you just talked about, Bob, I need resources out on the street. Give me another person, not increase the overtime.
Where did the average of 25, where did that come from? Because I was unclear where you got that number from.
What,
You said the average number was 2,500. Where did that?
if you take your overtime, what you submitted through payroll for this going into 2016, you can calculate what an average would be for the end of the year, minus nothing extreme happened. And it gives you 24, what? 24.6? We increased you to 4,000. 2,460 is what that average would be. We increased you to 4,000.
So, and sorry, I'm still unclear. Where did that number come from? Did you use 16's numbers to get that, or?
What you've already submitted. You submitted. We're going off of your overtime hours.
January?
Just to give a baseline, trying to forecast out what the year would be.
Oh, so what I've already submitted for
2017,
January over.
yes.
I'm sorry, 2017, yes, January.
Okay, so what I've submitted so far to January, you averaged out to what it's gonna be? Okay.
And now we all know that that's just a projection.
Yeah, and that's not gonna be accurate in any way, I'm sure. Because there are gonna be certain things that will come up that unexpected, I'm sure. One thing,
Well,
one event that I know is gonna cause overtime because of the discussions we've already had, and we're still trying to plan this out, is whenever the eclipse is, that's gonna cause some overtime because the amount of people that are gonna be here.
okay. Now, if you would have come in last court meeting and broke it down that there's an increase in population, the eclipse is going to cause us to do overtime, but we didn't hear that.
Because I don't have
And-
any
and,
idea on how.
You know, what
it's-
Bob just said had nothing, I mean, that's,
Okay.
when I said you have to articulate,
Okay.
that's, you know, we're way into the year.
Okay. I understand. I understand where you're coming
Have you already been doing studies on it?
from. On,
What effect it's going to have on your overtime budget?
have had one meeting, I'm supposed to get with, well, Randy Newcomb is supposed to get with all law enforcement, and we're supposed to have another meeting. And that's where I'm figuring that my numbers will come from, based on what he finds out, because it's never happened around here before. And he's got all that information gathering, I'm assuming, because that's what he told me.
So we don't have anything on that right now.
Right now, we don't know. Just pure speculation of, they're saying throughout western Kentucky, anywhere from 250 to 300,000 people. That's their best guess, western Kentucky as a whole.
Well, let me ask you this. In the budget mindset that I have, when that happens, you have a set amount of money for your overtime. You could come back to the court and say, look how much I just spent for this one event. And we have the authority to amend that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? That's the communication that, when we sat down, we had the conversation about it. If it's justifiable, we can support that. But you have to show it.
Certainly January is not going to be indicative of our summer tourist here, I wouldn't think.
No. But I mean, you can look, just like the court time hours, asking about the overtime in the court. You can go back and look. It was 129 this year. I think it was 198 the year prior. I mean, there's ups and downs, and we all understand that. It fluctuates, and it has, and it didn't start this year. I mean, it has, but we're identifying specifics that are consistent over the years. One being the way you used to do the traffic details. We used to pay the overtime. You would go out and bid those traffic details, and we've had this discussion. Fringe was not included in your bid. You underbid everybody. What should have been a revenue over the past years, and that's one of my questions I think you're still working on, is to get those hours in 2013, because that's 50, did you get that?
Yes, it was sent to Mr. Warden.
So, the going out and underbidding all the other local agencies and not including the fringe, what should have been a revenue actually cost the taxpayers. But we no longer do that, because at the beginning of the year when we came in, we realized that if you're gonna bid, you should bid at about $50 an hour so that you can, or more. We wanted to do 55. You went out and told them not to communicate with us,
Oh, I did not.
and they would not communicate with us.
Oh, I did not.
And you had your employees work directly for that contractor.
No,
Now-
Judge, I did not tell them not to talk to you.
Okay. Well,
I
they,
did not. And I want that clearly understood. I did not tell them to
Okay.
do that. And you're putting words in my mouth that did
Well,
not happen.
I'm telling you that $55 is what would have actually made a revenue,
I understand that.
okay?
But you are putting words in my mouth that did
Well,
not happen. I
we're
did not
gonna-
tell them not to talk to you.
We're gonna
That was their
disagree on that.
decision, not mine.
We're gonna disagree on that. The fact that you underbid all those years, and actually you used those years for your justification. We're no longer doing that. 5,500 hours in 2013, I think that was in Lyon County, cost Marshall County taxpayers money. Now they work directly for the contractor. And the contractor pays the employee directly. By making that decision, what'd you do? You actually took the retirement benefits that we used to pay into your employees out of the equation. So if an employee in their 5-year high wants to increase their retirement, those hours that they're working out there on the street don't go towards their retirement. And it was the decision that you made because we were looking at the details. And ultimately, your men and the taxpayers were put in the crossfire. I won't stand for that. I made it very clear I won't stand for it. That's why I told you it'd come out of your paycheck, your pockets, not the taxpayers. And until we realize we've got to get your agency, you and your administrative team under control. That's what this all is about. And we don't know how much money we lost. We got to do better. So I ask again, do we want to amend it or not?
I don't at this time.
Okay? Nope.
I've already answered the question. I'd like more information. We've already had this conversation. I'd like to have all the information, have a chance to talk to this man and make an informed decision. I've heard one side of the story again here, but I didn't have all that information when I made that, and we did that yesterday.
You had all the information that everybody else had.
On December 30th, I got it. The courthouse closed and ask questions and sit down and discuss, and, that's not the only issue that I've had a problem with, as well documented, that we need to be able to sit down and discuss the facts that we have so we can make an informed decision. And that's a concern to me that obviously this is a concern, and you are correct. I read the same auditor's reports you do, and that was my concern when I took office, of some of these reports that, not in our opinion, but the state auditor's opinion, and they needed to be corrected. And there's no doubt about that, because that's a pattern. But the decision, and I explained my vote on January 3rd, with the information that I had, and like I say, I didn't feel like that I had all the information that was available. I don't speak the language, I don't know, and I'm sure Bob and Johnny, you've got an advantage because of your law enforcement experience, that some of this overtime is reimbursed. I don't know all that. I get a spreadsheet with not time. I wasn't in the meeting with the treasurer and the sheriff, and we didn't hear of that conversation in the 3 meetings, but, whatever went down or whatever conversation there was, we didn't hear of that. Our treasurer didn't report anything that happened in that meeting, except the overtime hours as it was in the past. So like I say, I didn't feel like that I had the information that, at that time, I made a decision on the information that I had.
Any other questions?
I just have one thing I want to, this is not really related to what we've been talking about, but it is in a kind of a way. You'd asked our office to get you DUI information, domestic violence information, AI information. Independently, I don't have any way of doing that, so what we did, this is just kind of an explanation. I went to Tiffany Fralix, Griffith, our clerk, and she was a great help in getting this information. But what she has to do, and this is specific to DUIs, because DUIs are enhanceable offenses, so she has to look it up: DUI first offense, DUI second offense, DUI third offense, DUI fourth offense. So that's what she did for each of the years that you requested, and she came up with a printout. What we discovered, though, is that, let's say for an example, that Joe Smith got a DUI last week and was charged with DUI first offense, okay? And then a day later, he comes into court, I look at his driving record. Oh, wait a minute, he had one last year. So this needs to be a DUI second offense. So I make the motion in front of the judge, this should be a DUI second offense. What that does in Tiffany's database is Joe Smith is going to show up on the DUI first list, and he's also going to show up on the DUI second list. So that's going to skew the numbers if you just look at what she pulls. So what we did is the girls and I went over and actually physically pulled those files to reduce the risk of having some bad numbers. And I say all that to tell you this: the numbers that I gave you for 15 and 16, I'm not certifying that they are 100% accurate. That's the best that we could do with the information.
With the information, correct.
And if you look at the state numbers, they'll probably be different. And they may be different how we broke them down by agency. What I do feel pretty strongly about is that, having gone through all those records, is that I think the DUI ratio and the drug-only cases, I think those are pretty accurate. And it looks roughly like, out of all our DUI cases, roughly about a third of them are drug-only cases. I thought it would be a little bit higher than that myself, just being in court and seeing the cases, but that's what it appears to be.
Right, and of those numbers, because last meeting, we took two channels here. We were talking overtime, and then we started chasing, in my opinion, a rabbit with, we're at First County, we're wet, and then domestic violence increase. So we had two things. Overtime, of those numbers, how many officers were working overtime in the courtroom dealing with the DUIs? Because you got to look at the numbers that he submitted and kind of compare, because it's a whole number. It'll just group everybody that's made an arrest. I think there were 95 DUI arrests in 2016. And when you start breaking it down, how many of those arrests were on federal overtime and how many were on regular shift? And that's what affects the overtime budget. And then, since we kind of went down two different streets, we were trying to get those numbers to show what the actual increase in DUIs compared to each year now that we're a wet county. And I think in 2015, there were actually 58 in the numbers that we got, 58 DUI arrests in federal overtime. And I think on the numbers that you submitted, or the numbers that we got as far as that went through the case, the courts, was 58. So that's why I asked the question, if all your DUI arrests in 2015 were done through the federal overtime. So you have to look at both what, obviously, they're doing out on the street and how it ends up into your office. And just like you had a DUI first, within 3 or 5 years, now you bump it up, or if it's a DUI second, you go from a misdemeanor to a felony.
This is going to affect it as well, because you're trying to say what's DUI overtime in court. That officer may be there on 3 or 4 different cases, and one of them may be DUI, but it's still court overtime.
Sure.
And that's going to be extremely difficult to break out how much time he has spent in court for that one DUI.
But you should have, if they're doing a pay, we're talking about paying your employees, you should have that pay stub, how you keep up with your overtime. Not us. We have to extract that information.
But that's what I'm saying. or maybe we're not understanding because you said you wanted DUI overtime related to court. Well, it could be, one officer in there on 5 different cases, and one of them may be DUI, and he's sitting there the entire time.
Right. And if you remember on your document that you submitted, it was 129 court overtime. Of that 129, how much is it involved with DUI? Because then you can start breaking down how much overtime you're actually spending in court with your DUI offenses. And then your DUI, it's not all alcohol. You got drugs. So it's very complicated, but
And that's not uncommon for there to be an officer there in court for multiple cases.
right. The data that we get, though, from your office, just from last meeting to this one, there's a lot of inaccuracies. And that's why, unfortunately, we have to go into the weeds on this. Okay, so no motion on amending the 50,000, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries.